I'm going to just do some Zoom housekeeping, and then we'll review our agenda. This meeting is being recorded, and it will be available as a link later for those that couldn't attend. Right now, I hope you all have the chat box open. That will be our primary way of communication, and please don't hesitate to ask questions, add links or comments throughout the meeting. Later, if we can get the participants box open for you guys, we'll encourage you to use that. The main feature we want to make available to you is raise hand. That feature is also in your toolbar. So if you hover above or below on your screen, you get your toolbar pop up and you can raise your hand if you would like to speak on mic, and you can ask a question, address everyone, and during our challenges and successes open forum, I'm going to encourage people to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to our agenda here. This was emailed out to you last week. You see it's a pretty basic agenda with some discussion items around questions I've heard from many of you. So I'm hoping this is a meeting where we can share and get some ideas for how to make your chairmanship of your committees more effective, and make sure that that we're serving and orienting committee chairs and priority group consultants as best we're able. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the agenda. And I'm going to start with some brief updates. The updates I'd highlighted in the email included an update on ALA Connect, which is still not ready. But at this point, I wanted to turn to staff to ask staff to make a brief update on where we are with ALA Connect.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So the new Connect is expected to launch sometime soon after midwinter. So yeah, so hopefully sometime in March. The vendor is currently working on the design for the new space, and it's shaping to be like really fun and interactive and exciting to use. Since we have an extended amount of time, the vendor will be improving functionality, introducing polls and collaborative documents, and fixing some bugs in order to have a smooth migration period come the launch time. But until that launch happens, the old Connect is still going to be available for you to use the same way we've always been using it. So continue to use that, and we will keep you updated as we get updated.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. And I'll ask for everyone's indulgence. You're going to see me reaching for my cup and my thermos a lot through this meeting. I have a little cold, so I figure that's better than hearing me cough. And so speaking of ALA Connect, that's where you can find out the latest on the ALA Executive Director search. You may all have seen through email updates from our President, Jim Neal, that the ALA Executive Director Search Committee was unsuccessful in finding a candidate in the first round. They brought a recommendation back to Council to revisit the resolution that had been revisited once before already about the MLIS requirement for the Executive Director. The search committee recommended making the MLIS preferred but not required for the executive director, and felt that this would produce a better search result as they continue the search. You can read all of the discussion on that council had following this on ALA Connect. I will just share that page with you for a moment, but if you log in to ALA Connect and search for the ALA Council Committee, these are public discussion threads, and you should, and you can check in on their discussion. As you see, they are now taking a vote. The poll will close on Monday, and they will report out by Tuesday at the latest. But you are able to see the entire vote proceeding. Because it is an online vote, they must have 50% of counselors voting, and the yes votes must come in at 75% to be successful. That's laid out in the poll is open discussion thread if you want to follow along. And I would just thank our counselor, Jenna Nemec-Loisy, for representing the ALSC board's continued support of making the MLIS requirement preferred but not required for the executive director search. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing the request to speak a little louder. So I will do that, and let me see if I can also find my mic controls, which I realize I have not done yet. Oh, hold on just a moment. So this is embarrassing, folks. I'm just going to ask if someone can remind me where I can find the mic controls on a Mac, because I've never done it before. Some can hear me just fine, and I'll just try to speak up. All right. I'm trying one more place. I have a moment, so I will use the moment to do this. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on in updates. Please keep me posted if you cannot hear me. And I'll move back to our agenda. The other update I wanted to make sure everyone had seen was the Airtable that I emailed out earlier. Staff set up this Airtable to more easily track which committee reports they've received from you, and also for you as committee chairs and priority group consultants to be able to see which report you are turning in when. So I'm going to just bring up that Airtable for a moment. As you see, you've got your committees listed here, a little checkbox if they are virtual. There's a lot of information on this table horizontally, but you've got a freeze frame here so that you can follow over. And this first set of columns is showing you which reports you have due when. They are slightly different depending on if you're a process committee or an award committee, if you're a joint committee, etc., or a discussion group. So this will show you which ones you have due when. And if you click on one of these, you get a little pop-up that has a bit.ly in it, and you can pop that right open and it'll take you directly to the form that you need. I'm glad some of you are finding this table helpful already. It's very helpful for us to see as you scroll on over. We have there your priority group consultant, the committee chair, your staff liaison, and then we have a list here of just a checkbox of whether the report has been received or not. So the quarterly report one was for September 15th, and most of those came in and were shared with the executive committee for our fall meeting. The quarterly report 2 is due December 15th. As those come in, we'll be able to prepare those for the board packet that goes to midwinter. As a reminder, when you send that committee form in, it is an automatic form that goes to staff and myself and to Jamie Campbell-Naidu, the president-elect. It does not automatically go to your priority group consultant because this is it's a single form submission. so we would have to, your priority group consultants would have to get all of the reports or none. And it's a lot of reports to get them all. So we ask you to copy your priority group consultant once you send in the report. So that once you submit that form, the form goes automatically to staff and the president and president-elect. And then your next steps are to make sure that you share it with your priority group consultant, with your committee, and also post it on Connect. And click, when you post it on Connect, please click the box that makes it a public and shareable document. Since we still have access to Connect, we'll still use that as our document repository. And when the transfer does happen, all of those documents will transfer over. Having those reports posted publicly on Connect is the process that makes your reports in your committee work most easily accessible to membership or people who may be scouting for committees. So if members are wondering what does that committee do, they can go and peek at your reports, but only if they've been posted publicly on Connect. So thanks in advance for all the work in making sure those reports wind up in the right place. And we hope this Airtable will be really helpful in keeping track of that. It takes a considerable amount of work to set it up at the beginning of the year because all of those links have been built manually by staff. So thank you, staff, for building that for us. That's it for my updates. If there are other questions that you have as the meeting moves along, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat box. But now I'm going to move along to our first discussion item, which is strategies for getting response to committee calls for applications and surveys. Many of you chair committees that where part of your regular charge is to get applications for scholarships or grants, or to otherwise get members to reply to a survey or requests for information. I previously encouraged you all to use this group to amplify your calls. You have the ALSC listserv to post to, of course, and can always invite people to share the word. But don't hesitate to call on your other chairs as a way to get a slightly more personal touch on amplifying those calls. There's a lot of this kind of traffic going out and about in our profession, and certainly within ALSC. And so it is worthwhile if you can find particular advocates for your applications that you think would be helpful in amplifying in certain places and making personal requests to forward things. I wanted at this point to open it up for thoughts about what has worked well or what some of you still struggle with when you're trying to get responses for applications or for surveys. And here you can go ahead and just start typing in the chat box. But if you would like to speak, just pop open your menu bar at the top or bottom of your screen to use the raise your hand function, and I can call on you and Elizabeth can give you the mic. So Hannah's sharing about the MLIS grad program email lists. And Hannah, can you say a little bit more about those and how you identify and post to those? I like Mary Fellow's idea of just handouts to use with a link to the application. And I'm glad to hear that worked well. I remind people for a moment, I don't know if this was helpful or not, but that each committee does have a small budget, $100 a year for most committees for this, if you need postage, reproduction, office sorts of reimbursements for small projects like this. So do know that that is available to you if you want to try a project like this. I'm wondering too if people have made use of state lists, or if there are specific social media outlets that seem to have been useful. Rachel is mentioning a blog post about the Bechtel Fellowship. And some of your committees have regular blog posts, or you may be a blogger. If you feel like a blog post would be helpful for you to put out your call for applications or survey and you do not have access to that, do feel free to ask up through your priority group consultant about doing a guest blog post or having someone post on your behalf. So Marge has utilized their state youth consultant and asked them to share. I know that can be challenging because there are a lot of states, but tapping people who can post to state or regional districts can be really helpful. So Andrea is posting about using a raffle prize to get responses to a survey. And surveys are something we are doing a lot more of as an association. I know staff are trying to make sure that those are scheduled and managed so that they go out at the right times for the right process without having survey overload on our membership. I think raffles can be a really helpful way to get responses. Elizabeth, do you want to talk a little bit about how that was used? Here?
Well, the task force hasn't done the survey yet. They're planning for it, I believe, for January. But they were pretty much just discussing what incentives they could give to engage the student gift recipients in the survey so we can get as much feedback as possible. So I just have a few, well, we have a few raffle prizes actually. I have a few books, and we're gonna raffle off a free online course, like a gift certificate. Just one, but yes.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all that takes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Has anyone else out there used a raffle for responses successfully? Or let me also ask if anyone has been really stuck on getting responses to a specific application or a specific survey. I'll just give this a couple more minutes. I can't see in this format if people are typing or not, so I assume some of you are thinking or typing. And I'll just remind you again that you can use the raise your hand feature if you want to put out a question or talk about an application or a survey that you've been having trouble with. Hannah was asking if Public Awareness Committee didn't just use a raffle. And I don't remember honestly, and I don't think that Christy is here this afternoon, but I know that from time to time, raffles have been used as ways of getting responses to different surveys. And Kendra's talking about posting on Storytime Underground Facebook page, and that seems to have boosted the response rate, especially from non-members. And I'll just throw out there that you shouldn't feel afraid to tap non-member groups. We're doing that when we send to MLIS or state listservs, but on social media as well. I think finding a group that has some affinity with the application or survey that you're putting out can be really helpful to get the word out there. And utilizing sometimes some of the affiliate listservs. If you have a member connection who's on an affiliate listserv, can be a good way to get the word out as well. I think sometimes finding the listservs where people are paying most attention and aren't overtapped can be helpful. Or if people see something come up on multiple listservs, sometimes they may catch their interest. Amy Kester, who's the board liaison to public awareness, says that the committee's been using raffles to incentivize participation. Amy, can you share a little bit about what sorts of raffles they've been using, what they've been raffling off? So. And I'll also put out, while that's coming up, Danielle from the Education Committee. The Education Committee puts out calls for webinar and course proposals, and sometimes receive very few submissions when the post is on that blog and the listserv. And I'm wondering if people have suggestions for places that the Education Committee could put out these calls. I'm guessing, Danielle, that these are kind of general calls for course proposals, but that I don't know if sometimes they are calls, and that sometimes they are calls with specific subjects attached to them. So I'm following a few threads in the chat there. Hannah's wondering if we can share out a list of places that have been useful to post. Let's start by, if people can continue to pile on in the chat where they have posted successfully, we can start this as, can gather the information and put it back out as an email to the group and see what we have. Danielle from the Education Committee is saying that sometimes, yes, the Education Committee is just putting out general calls, and that sometimes they have calls for specific webinar series. And as a past chair of the Education Committee, I will just put in a plug that those calls for webinars and course proposals are great things to send out to any professional community you can think of, because they're really looking for content experts who would have something to contribute to ALSC membership. And it's a great opportunity, especially if you have a course or webinar that you've been thinking about that you would like to see. It's a great opportunity to send it on and encourage people to submit a webinar or course proposal. And Amy's been continuing to share some of the raffles that the Public Advisory Committee has been raffling off, and they sound like little fun things, like a library transforms a library transforms badge, a $25 gift certificate, some small things that that have helped get responses. And Amy, if you have any last thoughts about what sorts of those raffles have been, what sorts of raffle prizes have been the most successful, or if it just seems to help just to have a raffle prize, that would be really interesting as well. And thank you for everyone who's continuing to put suggestions for where you post. I'll make sure we gather this off the chat from the recording, and I'll share out as a list to our email group. So thanks, Amy, for sharing that. That it just seems, she says, it just seems to help just to have a small prize, especially something small that people might not go to the effort to get for themselves. I'm going to encourage you guys to type in your last thoughts about where to post to amplify calls for applications or surveys, any last things that you are stuck on, or any last ideas that you have that I can put in the email thread. And I'm going to move us along to our next discussion topic, which was committee resources and leader orientation and mentoring. For this, I invited you to spend some time looking at the committee resources on our committee page, and I'm going to go there now. This is the page for ALSC committees. As the website is transforming a little bit, if you I usually find this page by Googling ALSC committees, or it's under the About section on the ALSC main page. This is just started to go through some redesign, you might notice. Now we now have the committees listed linearly under each priority group. And there's also a little V to indicate the virtual committee, so it's easier to find the virtual committees. At the bottom of this page is where you find your committee resources. There is a recording from our last meeting, and I'm just going to apologize here for something I never realized I did, which I put October on the title screen of that meeting, and apparently nobody noticed. I have a funny thing between August and October, and I often confuse them. And I think it's because they both start with vowels and they're both even numbers or something. I can't keep them apart, however. And we have here the best practices for virtual committees wiki. This was a resource that was developed by the task force that moved many of our committees to virtual committees, but you see that and that was created a while ago, but many of those most of those best practices still stand true today. And there's the process chair's orientation webinar, which is available as a self-led webinar for all process committee chairs. Award committee chairs receive direct orientations at annual and midwinter. What does that ALSC committee do is a survey that was done 2 years ago by the O&B committee, and it's just a handy way to browse the workload requirements of each committee. We have a link to ALSC on ALA Connect. Your committee work plan template, which is a helpful exercise that you can use with your committee each year to plan your work. The division leadership manual, which is has everything you need to know. That's your go-to for your duties on processes, forms, and calendars. An FAQ for figuring out how to do your committee work. There's the priority group consultant manual, and finally your ALSC forms, and I'll just quickly go to that one. You now have links from the Airtable to the reporting forms that you need, but your ALSC forms page also has your committee change request. If your committee wants to work with O&B to request a change in your composition statement or charge, and a board action request form for anything that needs to be brought to board. There's a few other forms that you might use from time to time at the bottom as well. So after that little tour through the committee resources, I wanted to open this up for discussion. I see that it's already started a little bit in the chat, which is really helpful about systematic updating of manuals. I wanted to open this up to any comments or questions, but I'll start by posing a couple to you all. What do you find yourself as a committee chair or priority group consultant? What do you find yourself looking for most frequently? Can you find it when you're looking for it? And what might make it easier to find or easier to use? You can go ahead and type in the chat box. You can also raise your hand if you'd like to speak on the mic. So some of you spend a lot of time on this page already and are able to find what you need. The reimbursement form is one, and I'll just show people where that is really quickly while you guys continue to add. If we go to the ALSC forms, let's hope that I can find it here. And it's not actually right on here, so that must mean that it is inside the division leadership manual. So I'm going to take that note down that that's just might be one that we could provide a direct link to. Contact information is something that Matt is often looking for. That's something that I frequently look for too. And I'm also usually able to find what I need. It does, if you're looking for contact information for a committee chair, priority group consultant call link, it does require that you log into the site so that you get the full rosters when you click on the committee. You should also be able to, for most committees, when you get a committee roster, there's an arrow at the bottom to look at previous years and an arrow to go forward to new years. So if there's somebody, if you're trying to find someone who was a previous chair or the upcoming chair, you can usually find them as well. I say most committees because some of the committees that where we have ones running concurrently, it doesn't work quite so elegantly. So most of the award committees don't work exactly like that. I am scrolling back through your comments because you guys are all posting really good ideas. Amy's reminding us that the member directory link is also on the About ALSC Contact Us and Staff Directory page. And I will show you guys that in a moment. So Rita's been posting some thoughts about the Wilder Committee, and I'll mention something. She says under the what does that committee do, Wilder is not listed. And there's a few committees there that were not listed. And that is because that page was compiled as a survey through committee chairs. I believe that my memory is that O&B is talking about doing a redo of this page. So that and Joanne is here, so maybe she can address that on updating this page. So I will just say when the survey goes out, that's a survey we need responses to from every committee, and maybe we should use a raffle. You guys can tell me what raffle prize you would like to get you to reply to the what does that committee do survey. So Edie has a really good suggestion here on the volunteer form to have a link to what does the ALSC committee do page. I think so too, but I have a feeling that it's not possible because when we go into that form, I don't think that we can link out from the form, but I'm going to find out. Glad to see that many of you have found the orientation webinar helpful. So that's really good feedback. One of you has mentioned guidelines for writing for the blog, and I'm not sure if we do have those on the website. I know they do go out to bloggers, but that's a good point that having them in a findable place online would be helpful. You guys can keep on typing. I'm scrolling through to see if I'm addressing everything, and I wanted to I'm going to take a moment to show you guys the membership contact. So you go, I have to move some of my boxes here, sorry. If you go to About ALSC and Contact ALSC, and at the bottom, I'm trying to Elizabeth, maybe you can pop on because I never find it this way. Okay. As I'm continuing to go through your guys' questions, Africa a few minutes ago asked, is it possible to add to the volunteer form expectations of committee members or a preference list such as active on social media? We just revised the volunteer form. And I will find out how possible it is to add in a question at this point without wiping out other comments, because that is the one that we did not include. We do have kind of a general place for people to add what their skills are, but I'm reading between the lines. I'm realizing that some of your committees really benefit from having people who are active on social media or proficient at blogging is another one that comes up, and that would be a specific skill that would be helpful to ask people to identify on the volunteer form. Amy has pointed out that the what does the ALSC committee do is linked from the volunteer form, so I'm wrong about that. I'm glad to say. I think it's within each committee. We'll look into whether we can actually link them out from each committee. And that might be, going back to Africa's question, that might also be a helpful piece of information to include on the next survey for what does that ALSC committee do, which Joanna has confirmed is, O&B is working on to include information about public member expectations in terms of being on social media or blogging. Someone else has said that you find out what you need on the ALSC site through a Google search. And I find that actually the most useful way too.
Sorry, Nina. Yeah, right there for the membership directory.
There we go. It's right there.
There it is. Yeah. Once you click on that, you'll have to log in. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, so this goes back to the question about finding contact information. So you can do that through the committee rosters, which is helpful if you're trying to get in touch with somebody on a committee and you don't know who that is, or you need the last year's chair of such and such. If you know who you're looking for and you don't know what committee they're on, then the searchable online membership directory is right there. And I just kept on scrolling right past it. I always use this page for staff first. That's where I'm always at that page, and I don't see anything until I'm through with that. So thank you guys for all of the comments on this. We still have a little bit more time if people have other questions about finding committee resources or committee resources that you wish you had here that aren't here. I was going to ask a question, which some of you preempted, which was great, which is that the chair orientation process for the process committees is really designed to be self-led. You have the orientation webinar and the division leadership manual available to you on the committee resources page. And I wondered if people found those helpful, and if there's any way that we could make a self-led onboarding for process chairs better. So if you have, and I'm glad that the webinar is helpful. It sounds like people are able to find what they need on the committee resources page, but if there's ever anything that you are hoping to find or you think could be improved, do go ahead and let us know. You can let me know later too if you don't want to put it in the chat box. You can feel free to email me. All right, so I'm gonna do, if things occur to you a little bit later, please feel free to share them in the chat because we'll be able to keep this as a record for the meeting. At this point, we're into the last 15 minutes for the meeting, and in the last 5 minutes, I have a couple of announcements and see if there's any last announcements. But right now, I wanted to open it up to challenges and successes open forum. So it's a chance for you guys to just ask whatever questions you have for leadership or for each other, or to share something that your committee did recently that you thought worked really well that you want to share with other committee chairs. And here I really want to encourage you guys to take advantage of the raise hand feature so that you can just talk on the mic. Just use your menu bar at the top or bottom of the screen to raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can also, if you prefer, put things in the chat box. That's fine too. So I want to, while you guys are thinking of your challenges and successes to share, I thank Hannah for this comment about having some synchronous activities if possible. It's always hard with time zones, so I'm really pleased to see that there have been about 40 of you here at this meeting. That's really amazing. And so a virtual meet and greet for new chairs at the beginning of a term would be helpful for onboarding. And I think now that we're feeling out this platform, that's certainly something that's doable. Um, so while I'm taking notes on this, and I'm going to assume some of you guys are talking, but I encourage you to share your questions, or each of you probably has something that your committee has done in the last 3 or 4 months where you just thought this is a great success. Someone proposed you hold a meeting in a certain way. You updated something that hadn't been updated in a long time. And this is a really good place to share the idea. Don't feel shy about bragging. What you're doing is sharing a success that another committee may be able to copy. You're going to provide an aha moment for someone, and it's going to be a gift. Oh, Mary Ann, thank you for raising your hand. Elizabeth, could you promote Mary Ann Martin's 2 panelists and give her the mic, and she's going to share with us. Hey.
I don't really have a success story to tell you guys, but I would like to share how we're dealing with the challenge. So I'm co-chair of Notable Children's Digital Media, which is a brand new committee. And, you know, there are so many challenges with this committee. I can't even begin to tell you, but, you know, the idea of, you know, which apps do you pick? So, and also I was listening or reading all the chat things about promoting, because we had pretty thin responses from our various requests for recommendations, and I went to various listservs. So did Aaliyah. We went to a bunch of different places, but you know, we got some. The other challenge then is the platforms. You know, are we looking at you know, Apple apps only? Are we looking at other ones? You know, all those kinds of things. Are we looking at for-fee apps? Are we looking at free apps? And we ended up just having to make decisions. We were like paralyzed for a while, Aaliyah and I, because we couldn't really figure out what to do. So we've decided just to go for this first inaugural round of this committee to just look at free apps. And so that's what we're going to be putting together for the first round list of these apps. So that's all.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And I'm sure that many people are interested in seeing what's happening with our Notable Children's Digital Media list and our new awards. You know, I just, that's a great example of what committees or task force can be tasked to do, which is to figure out how to do something we've never done before. And sometimes that is a paralyzing or confusing scenario. And I'll just say that I hope that all committee chairs always feel empowered to ask questions, or to you know, come check in with your priority group consultant and to come back to leadership or board and say, here's where we are. We have these questions. That's why we've asked you to take it on, is because we don't know how to do it yet. You guys are on the front lines to figure it out. And these new awards and lists especially will be really exciting, and I expect they will evolve.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I teach a related class, so my students are always really frustrated because they don't have a place to go for apps. So it's going to be really great to, you know, be able to guide them to this in the future. And and yes, we have been working closely, especially with Andrew on this. So and you also a little bit now as well. So you know about some of these issues.
Yeah, and I'll say Joanna is chatting there that her committee is in the same boat with Excellence for Early Learning Digital Media. So that there is a task force that's them sharing for everybody here. The Digital Media Awards Implementation Task Force is being chaired by Andrew Medlar. He's working with Mary Ann and Aaliyah's committee, the Notable Children's Digital Media Committee, as well as Joanna's committee, Excellence for Early Learning Digital Media, and with Children and Technology, who are working on the new Media Mentorship Award. And so these are our 3 new awards and lists to support digital media mentorship. And ALSC, it really is a new thing. We'll be hearing more about these at midwinter. Bruce shared out a little bit exciting. I'm glad you shared this, Bruce, from the Intellectual Freedom Committee. Thanks to the IF committee, ALSC has been working with the Comic Books Legal Defense Fund to do a comic book version of the revised ALSC Kids Know Your Rights resource. So fingers crossed that should be ready for us by Free Comic Book Day in May. And we had a little exchange there in the chat too about committees tweeting. Just want to thank Elizabeth Serrano, who's been here leading our meetings for us and also is our leads our Twitter feed. In the past, committees have tagged We Are ALSC for retweeting, and that's something Elizabeth can help with as well. So certainly where your committee needs is looking to amplify something to membership, that's something that Elizabeth can help with. Any other success stories or challenges or questions anyone would like to share?
I just wanted to add, even if you're maybe not on Twitter or social media, you can always email the article to me if you think it'd be something that you'd want us to put out. Yeah, you can talk to me about it, or even if it's anything in general to promote. That is my email address. I put in the chat box there.
And Hannah Lee is sharing that she was able to transfer a rubric that had previously required a lot of separate documents into a Google form that talks directly to one big spreadsheet, so the committee's all working in the same place at the same time. And I certainly think that wherever committees can make things less work and more transparent, as they have, it's really, really helpful, especially where things can be collected in a way that can be easily passed from committee to committee. And just to bring this back to Connect again, I think that because of the challenges of the past Connect and the challenges in the transfer, committees have just found the best way to work virtually. And for many committees, that is in Google Drive and in some form or fashion. And I think that when the new Connect comes up, we'll work together on some best practices to make sure that links to the Google, to make sure that committee work that's being done in Google that needs to be preserved and transferred is linked and accessible to future committee chairs through Connect, and that items that need to be made public to our membership are transferred to and uploaded to Connect. I think that's the main piece that we want to make sure follows through. But I have certainly found that I do all of my ALSC work in Google, really, and much of the committee work can be very, very helpful to do that way, especially because it's so easy to bring your new committee members right into it. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to keep on typing in your challenges and successes, but we're getting to the top of the hour. And I just want to let everyone know if you may have seen on the ALSC post or ALSC board list, if you follow the board email list, we have an online board meeting on Monday. This is mostly a housekeeping board meeting. We're working through a lot of motions handed to us from organization and bylaws. I just want to do a shout out to the O&B committee for helping us with a lot of housekeeping around our virtual committees. Our virtual committees have been named in different ways in their committee statements and composition statements, and it's made it a little bit hard to identify which committees are virtual. Some have been operating as virtual committees without ever having the composition statement changed. So ONB has gone through all of our committees, established a standard way of identifying a virtual committee, and has submitted motions to change all of the language that needs to be changed to get them all in line. I really appreciate that. There are some other ONB motions as well, and we're also taking a look at the terms and criteria that have been developed so far by Marianne and Aaliyah's Notable Children's Digital Media Committee. The Excellence in Early Learning Digital Media Committee and the Media Mentorship Award. Those are the two that are awards rather than notable lists. And those terms and criteria need to pass through the big ALA awards committees so that we can finalize the establishment of those awards. So we're looking at those at our board meeting on Monday too. We'll hold our board meeting in Zoom like this. It's a slightly different format. It's a meeting format rather than a webinar format, but guests are welcome. I will send out the link for that meeting to this email list at the end of this meeting in case you would like to sign up to watch. It'll be a lot of housekeeping with motions, but if you're a governance wonk, you are really welcome to be there, or just curious about how we're handling our online board meetings. With that, I'm going to ask if there are any last thoughts or questions or announcements that anyone would like to make. Oh, and thank you, Jill, for mentioning that that she is periodically updating the best practices for virtual committees wiki, and that anyone can edit it. Just giving everyone a moment to type last questions. Good for you, Hannah. Hannah's putting in a last chance to apply for the Hayes Author and Illustrator Award and the Baker and Taylor Summer Reading Program grant. Applications are due today, so we know what you're doing when you sign off here. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this up and thank everyone for coming and participating. Thank you, Elizabeth, for hosting, and everyone for sharing in the chat. Please feel free to let me know offline, online, how this works for you, what else you'd like to see. We've got some good suggestions here for some things we can update easily on the website. We don't have yet a next quarterly meeting established. I think our next opportunity to get together like this will be at Leadership and ALSC at ALA Midwinter. So I look forward to seeing you all there, and we can be in touch by email and elsewhere. So thank you all.